Welcome to the N1 Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Sadu, and today we are going to be chatting about hunger and cravings because I think that the two often get confused. So let's delve into this. What is hunger? Hunger, by definition, is a feeling of discomfort or weakness caused by lack of food. It's also coupled with the desire to eat. And then on the other hand, a craving is simply a powerful desire for something. So cravings aren't limited to food. We can crave a television show, we can crave a lazy Sunday, we can crave sex or someone we love, a whole bunch of different things when it comes to cravings. Now, the primary difference between hunger and a craving is that hunger is a physical sensation that happens from the neck down. So, for example, your stomach growling, not because you ate something that didn't agree with you necessarily, but because your body is telling you that it wants food. A craving happens from the neck up, and it's not a physical sensation, it's mental, and it manifests itself more so in thoughts. Now, the one exception is if you see a commercial and you start to salivate or something like that, but that might happen right after a super filling meal, simply because the food that you saw looks delicious. You're not actually hungry. It's the ad that stimulated memories, thoughts, ideas in your head about how tasty that food would be if you ate it. So hunger is neck down, cravings are neck up. Also, when you are truly hungry, you would settle for just about anything food-wise, but when you have a craving, you only want specific food. So for example, let's say you think you're hungry and a piece of pizza sounds super appealing, but then someone offers you a piece of salmon with a baked potato and some vegetables and you don't want it. This is obviously a craving that popped up because if you were really hungry, you'd want the calories and the satiation that would come along with the salmon, potato, and veggies. So as a general rule, if you only want specific foods, typically they're going to be hyper-palatable, high-calorie treat-like foods, you are experiencing a craving. On the other hand, if you said you were hungry and someone offered up the salmon, potatoes, and veggies and you scarfed it down, that was probably some legit hunger. Now, to take this example to an extreme to illustrate the point, in the case of being really hungry, you'll eat things that you don't even necessarily like that much. But if they contain calories, you'll throw them down the hatch because hunger is not picky. There's an old saying that beggars can't be choosers, and I think this is potentially where that came from because when you're really hungry, you're absolutely ravenous, you're basically not turning any food down. Now, this is an extreme example, of course, but you get the idea. Now, what are the most filling foods? They are single ingredient whole foods without a doubt. Both a small glazed donut and a large baked potato have about 250 calories, but no one would argue that the potato is going to fill you up a lot more than the donut. So when your goal is fat loss, you want to choose single and minimal ingredient foods because they contain fewer calories, they're much more filling, and not to mention, obviously, they're way healthier. There's a concept called the protein leverage hypothesis that I don't think I've mentioned on the podcast yet, so I want to touch on this. The protein leverage hypothesis states that humans will prioritize the consumption of protein in food over carbs and fats and will eat until protein needs have been met regardless of energy content, thus leading to overconsumption of calories when protein intake is low. Now, I'll repeat that in English because it might have sounded a little bit confusing. Basically, the idea is that we humans eat to a protein minimum. So when you eat a low protein diet, your body wants to eat more and more calories because it's trying to attain that minimum protein target. Versus if you eat enough protein or even slightly more than you need, you feel super satiated on fewer calories. So fat loss tip, get your protein in. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably not dealing with any sort of food shortage. We actually have more than enough food to feed the whole world, but unfortunately, folks still go hungry due to political and food access issues, not because there isn't enough food on the planet. So we used to have a food shortage issue. We solved that. However, we have the same evolutionary systems in place that drive us to want to eat a ton because we didn't know exactly when our next meal was going to be. This is called an evolutionary mismatch. So our inherent tendencies are geared towards a food scarce environment because that was our situation for the vast majority of our history. But recently we solved that whole food shortage issue and now we have food abundance. The problem is that inherent tendency is still in place because evolution moves quite slowly. So the question becomes, what do we do about it? Like I mentioned before, we eat primarily single and minimal ingredient whole foods, and we make sure our diet has adequate protein. But outside of that, we need to be super aware of our food environment as well. If you have treat foods in your house that you find tempting, you've already lost, because it's not a matter of if you'll eat them, it's when. So as a rule, only bring food in your house that you want to eat and is congruent with your goals. Now, what else classifies as your food environment? Television is one. Food commercials kick up cravings because that's literally exactly what they're designed to do. The food manufacturer wants you to buy their product. Instagram, Facebook, even billboards on the side of the road classify as your food environment because they are constant reminders of all of these super tasty, calorie-dense food options that are available at any time. So for some folks, I actually recommend unfollowing social media accounts related to food because you're just not doing yourself any favors. If you like some accounts for recipes and things like that, great, but the fewer times throughout the day you can be reminded of food, the easier it's going to be to stay on point. Also, if you follow the food environment tips that I just laid out, you shouldn't even really need discipline or willpower in your home because that food shouldn't even be in your house to begin with. Now, for the folks who have families with different eating patterns, that's tough, right? Ideally, you'd all get on the same page and eat healthfully, but that's everyone's personal choice. Expanding on this food environment idea, if you think about it, it's very rare to see a mismatched fitness couple. Or in other words, it's super rare to see a really fit husband and an unfit wife, or a really fit wife and an unfit husband. It's also quite rare to see super fit parents and overweight children, or super fit children and overweight parents. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's because of genetics. Not really. It's actually because of lifestyle. Parents control what children eat. They buy the food, so it's just not possible for a young kid to eat whatever they want unless their parents make it so. And then when it comes to couples, we influence one another so much, and we typically attract likeness. So generally fit people date fit people, and unfit people date unfit people typically. So if you really boil this idea down, people are an aspect to your food environment too. If you hang out with a lot of heavy drinkers, you're going to drink more. If the vast majority of your friends are sober, you're probably going to be sober or something close to it too. Now, I'm not saying ditch all your friends with habits or goals that don't line up with yours. Just be aware of how the people you spend the most time with influence you and rub off on you. Also, protect your food environment and set yourself up for success because being that we have such an abundant access to food with old evolutionary mechanisms in place, it's a recipe to be overweight. Now, if you want to hear more about that specifically, have a listen to episode number 73 titled, "If You're Overweight, It's Not Your Fault, but This Is What to Do About It." I delve into a bunch more specifics in that episode. As we start to wrap up here, hunger is a physical sensation from the neck down. Cravings are mental and happen from the neck up. And the simplest way to tell the difference is the degree of your pickiness. If you only want specific foods, typically treat-like calorie-dense foods, you're probably experiencing a craving. But if you want super healthful food and that seems really appealing, you're likely legitimately hungry. If you're interested in personalized one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout design with me, you can head over to n1fitness.com/coaching or click the link in the show notes below. Also follow me up on Instagram at N1Fitness and friend me on Facebook at Marcus Sadu. Thanks so much for listening, guys, and I will catch you on the next episode. See ya!